Hey, it's Cashflow Mike, and welcome back to another episode of the Clear Path to Cash podcast. And this week, we're going to be talking about why most firms never make the shift to advisory, right? So a member called me a while back, mainly because they wanted to talk about something that had been bothering them, right? When they first joined the Clear Path to Cash, they told me they wanted to build an advisory practice. A few months later, they were frustrated because, in their words, I feel like I'm still doing the same work I was doing before. Hey, that surprised me because I knew they were starting to have different conversations with the clients. So I asked them, hey, why do you feel like that? And they said every January, they promise themselves that this will be the year that they finally make the shift. When, well, then you know what happens, right? Tax season shows up, the calendar fills up, and then before long, they're back to doing what they've always done. And so as we talk through it, I just kind of realized they weren't describing a motivation problem, right? They generally wanted to become more advisory focused. This issue was something else. A few days later, they told me about a meeting that ended up, answering a question really for both of us, right? A client had come in expecting to review their tax return. That was the agenda. The return was finished, the numbers had been finalized, and everything was ready to go. So about 10 minutes into the meeting, the owner leaned back and asked whether they could afford to open a second location that year. The advisor laughed when they told me the story because, well, at that point, the tax return almost disappeared. They weren't even talking about that anymore. The whole rest of the meeting wasn't even about taxes anymore, right? The owner just wanted to talk about cash, and they wanted to know what would happen if revenue slowed down. And they were worried about, taking out another loan and what that would do to them. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, they just admitted that they weren't even sure they wanted another location. They just didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. When the meeting was over, that advisor had realized something. The most valuable part of the hour almost had nothing to do with compliance. That actually gave him context. The return did. The return gave him context, right? The conversation was what created the value. So I think that's the transition a lot of firms are trying to make. They assume that advisory is something new that they have to bolt onto their practice. It's really already been there. It's already sitting there. I believe it. I believe it's already there. So it's hiding inside the conversations that happen after the compliance work is already done, right? That's why I don't think advisory begins with a new service offering. I think it begins the first time somebody chooses to stay with the client's question instead of rushing right back to the reports, right? Once that happens, your role changes, right? In the middle of the conversation, you're no longer walking someone through last year's financial statements or this year's tax returns. You're helping them think through next year's business. And guess what? That's a whole different relationship when you think about it, right? It's something I never really got from my first CPA. This member eventually told me something else that stuck with me. They said they'd always assumed advisory meant having bigger answers. Instead, they really figured out that it was mostly about asking better questions and knowing how to work through the conversation without getting lost in all the chaos. And that's what the framework gave them. It's just not another report. It's definitely not another dashboard, right? It's simply a way to stay with the client long enough to figure out where the real conversation needs to go. So if you've been thinking about building an advisory practice, I'm going to encourage you to stop looking for the perfect starting point. I want you to pay attention to the conversations you're already having. You might discover advisory has been sitting in your calendar all along, right? You'd also, well, I think so. I'd like to see how we can support you in those conversations, especially inside my Clear Path to Cash platform and the app. I want you to spend a little time inside the demo. So go explore that demo and watch how the conversation unfolds through the fix framework. Find the burning issue, identify what's causing it to catch fire, and execute and put out the fire. And that's where you'll understand what we've been building. It's a moment. It's that moment. And that moment, we know it. And the Clear Path to Cash was built for that moment.
Clear path to cash. Cash flow, Mike. No turning back. Cash flow, Mike. Straight through the dust. Cash flow, Mike. We trust. We trust. We trust. We trust.